All right. Hey guys, welcome. My name is Crimson Clad, and this, of course, is CyberBuzz Radio. And every Saturday about this time, right about here, right about now, for whatever time it is for you, I talk about blockchain and DeFi and disruptive tech and all sorts of cool stuff like that. And if you were here last week, we had Disregard Fiat was on, and we had a big interview, and it was a lot of fun. And this week, we get to do it again. So this week, I'm going to grab my screen here. I have Khal with me, so he can wave hi. You guys let me know that you can hear him okay. Say hi, Khal.
What's up?
There we go.
How's everybody doing?
So
that's my cue.
Yes, exactly. Just double checking that everything's working, because last week, boy, oh boy, did we have some exciting times. You know, exciting is good when it's expected exciting, not when all of your technology goes completely haywire. So this week, I'm going to kind of give everybody a little refresher, because the last time you were on with me, we had a lot of fun, and we were talking a lot about, obviously, LeoFinance. It was really just LeoFinance at the time. Khal says he sounds like he's in a tunnel. All right, well, I can turn his volume up, but I can't fix the ambient sound of his room. You'll just have to feel like you're right there with him, you know, with the surroundings. You are in the tunnel also. All right, I've turned you up. Hopefully that'll help everyone. But so the last time you were here, we were talking about LeoFinance, and obviously that was super exciting. It was brand new, and that was just sort of the first step in your plan for world domination and bringing DeFi to the masses and kind of getting this stepping stone of a ton of people on Hive who are interested in finance and Web3 and the social aspect, and kind of dragging some of them kicking and screaming into the future, and, you know, getting them to understand that there is a huge crypto space that is open to them to kind of really take control of their own finances and really explore a bit more. And, you know, Hive is this gateway crypto. I like to think of it that way. You get a lot of users on Hive who have never thought about the speculative side of crypto, that have never talked much about sort of what's possible. And obviously, since the time that LeoFinance is launched, you've got CubFi now, and of course, PolyCUB. So do you want to talk a little bit about the vision of PolyCUB? Because I think for a lot of people, we're going to have a 50-50 audience today. We're going to have badass LeoFinance OGs who know everything and are all in on DeFi. And we're going to have people who are around the Hive ecosystem, or who come and hang out to talk about tech and philosophy, who are like, that sounds terrifying. How does this project help me?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because, like you said, you know, last time I was on it was, you know, early stages of LeoFinance. It was probably called Steam Leo at the time, and the vision for what that could be kind of evolved as you know, the entire crypto industry evolved. So it kind of started out as you know, a decentralized seeking alpha, or a Web3 seeking alpha. That was kind of the vision at the time, and you know, how everyone framed it. Over time, we kind of started to expand, and obviously DeFi became a thing. It wasn't a thing when Leo launched, and then, you know, it became a huge deal in crypto. Is now, you know, most people don't just leave their Bitcoin or Ethereum or digital assets sitting on a wallet. They actually stake it into different platforms. So you know, as that industry evolved, we kind of looked into different ways that we could basically expand our reach. And you know, it first started as people on Leo were talking about DeFi, and I know like Dals was an early adopter of Binance Smart Chain and was writing a lot of posts about it. And then you know, we all kind of started jumping on that bandwagon. And then it kind of evolved from, you know, instead of just talking about these opportunities, which is very beneficial in and of itself, you know, to spread that around the community, we could actually create those opportunities ourselves and bring it directly into the fold and make it benefit everything that we're doing. So, you know, kind of true to that vision of always expanding our width and depth as a community. We've essentially just gone out to these different blockchains and looked for ways to connect them into the Leo token economy.
It's pretty crazy to see how quickly things are growing. Now, I will totally out myself as someone, and maybe I think I said this probably last time, is for me, I don't necessarily have the head for picking, stocks or really keeping up on sort of the crucial info that would allow me to be a really good investor. But in that whole time, I have been using CubFinance. I have been using PolyCUB. Like, I'll put it out there. I don't really know shit when it comes to making my crypto really, really work for me. And one of the things that I've really appreciated is like, if you came to, and this is, oh my gosh, I'm going to say this is terrible as somebody who's quite tech-minded and a witness, that I'm like, I'm a girl and I don't get money. So let's kind of put that to the side. But the long and the short of it really was, if you asked me about yield optimization and all of this sort of crazy terms that have kind of risen in the advent of DeFi, because as you say, yeah, last time it wasn't really a thing. It was sort of this idea that, okay, maybe I have some tokens, maybe I can lend some tokens, maybe I can provide some collateral, and things have just snowballed since then. It's crazy the stuff that is possible. So for me, I've been pretty appreciative of the idea that I can kind of click through and understand pretty quickly that, okay, these tokens can earn something for me. And so that's something that I think you guys have done so well. And, is that something, do you think that your sort of experiences with LeoFinance, the social community side of it, because it's one of the biggest and most bumpin' communities on chain. Everybody wants to talk about their experiences, write about crypto. And there is this sort of word of mouth effect that happens on Hive that is really difficult to replicate outside of our ecosystem. Have you found a lot of people just immediately diving in and adopting what's happening with PolyCUB and CubFi who maybe have been a little gun shy before outside of the ecosystem?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been cool to see that a lot of, and you can kind of, I'd say the best indicator of this is the questions that get asked in Leo Discord and other places. They're very basic and fundamental questions. So if you went back to when Cub launched on Binance Smart Chain, a lot of people were just asking, how do you get money onto Binance Smart Chain? What is MetaMask? How do you download MetaMask and install it in your browser? So, those are kind of some leading indicators of how basic the adoption of Cub, and then now with PolyCUB, kind of a similar, people are wondering, how do you add a new network to your MetaMask, and how do you add funds to Polygon? So, it's definitely been this interesting growth curve and learning curve where, you've got people who are very comfortable with DeFi and like you were saying, some Leo OGs who are already on different DeFi platforms on Polygon, and then obviously we're waiting for PolyCUB so that they can move their funds over to our platform. So it was definitely cool to see that mix, and it's also cool to have this community, which I think is the strong suit of Hive that obviously Leo is basically an echo chamber of, which is you've got these different skill levels of people that are a very diverse group, and people are generally really willing to help each other. So, when you jump in Discord or jump on Twitter and look at the conversations, there's plenty of people who are just getting into it for the first time, and then there's plenty of people who have been in it for a while and are helping them. So I would say, and it's kind of in the Leo white paper that one of the big things for our whole project, one of the big missions, is to basically democratize the opportunity and the financial opportunity of crypto, and just make it easier for everybody. So I hope that that's what we're accomplishing with things like PolyCUB.
I mean, I feel like it absolutely is, because for me anyways, like I say, it's just something, and this is not being a Hive maximalist, because one of the best quotes I've ever heard from anyone in this space was you, like tire pump here quickly, that we're not just, a specific coin maximalist, we're crypto maximalist. We are understanding that this space and these abilities, and Nurse just saying, and he's not an economist. Well, here's the deal. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be in anything. And that's the magic part of it is, Hive to me inherently feels safe. And part of that is because obviously I've been around since its inception and, backwards in time, but there's a lot of control that I have on the Hive blockchain and with my Hive tokens that I sometimes take for granted, because not all ecosystems with similar values or similar, value propositions are actually properly decentralized and whatnot. And I think for a long time that sort of kept me away from some of the things that were happening in DeFi because I'm used to the way that it is on Hive, and I have a high comfort level with that. And so when you say, one of the things I want to do is I want to kind of democratize this process. I want to get more people involved. I want to make it easier. This for me has been something that's absolutely happening. And it has taught me to be a little bit more open and take a look at some of these possibilities that come with these cross-chain bridges, with the way that you guys are thinking about these paths from chain to chain, and ways to do it that are still very sovereign, very easy, but that avoid some of the pitfalls that we see on some of these other ecosystems, some of these other chains, that centralization aspect that we're all trying to get away from. I feel like this is a really big mix, and it's certainly helped me kind of tamp down a couple of my rising maximalist tendencies. I'm not one, but every now and again, I will absolutely cheer harder for some chains than others. So it's been very cool to personally go through that journey. And one thing that I think is really interesting is that you guys have there's at least 3 really solid bridges now. So PolyCUB is Polygon, and you've got connections to BSC as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of which chains right now have integrations via all of the aspects of LeoFinance, and sort of what your plans are on that front?
Yeah. I don't remember where I said this, but kind of recently I said something along similar lines about, we're not, in LeoFinance, we're not crypto, we're not any sort of maximalist for any cryptocurrency. We're a kind of a collective maximalism for what's happening. A multi-blockchain maximalist, I think, would be kind of the best way to put it.
Yeah.
So the entire goal is just connect to as many blockchains as we can, go where the value is and connect it back into our economy. And then, obviously by extension, that means Hive, because, the native Leo token lives on Hive. So, just getting into the bridge stuff, I would say one of the most interesting things I've worked on so far. And I think that is going to become kind of the biggest, at least one of the biggest, aspects of the LeoFinance project is going to be Leo Bridge, which obviously needs a lot of work. It's kind of a big undertaking by us and our team and the community, but I think it is going to change the way that the entire economy works, and essentially what it does is you've got Binance Smart Chain, you've got Polygon, you've got Ethereum, and there's wrapped versions of Leo that live on those different blockchains, and we've basically created this smart contract for Leo Bridge where it automatically can transmit funds through the wrapped versions of Leo. So you can take US dollar tether on Binance Smart Chain, and you can automatically move it to USDC on Polygon. And it's all done through Leo Bridge and through the smart contract. And what's cool about that is that it moves through the native Leo token to get to each blockchain. So essentially, $1 trading volume on Leo Bridge is $1 trading volume on, Binance Smart Chain, for example. Then it's $1 trading volume on Hive. Then it's $1 trading volume on Polygon. So it's just interesting to see that evolve. And really where I see this headed is, there's blockchains like Terra that are getting massive adoption right now. Solana and Avalanche and Phantom. There's so many different blockchains that are getting this mass adoption right now. So we are moving quickly towards this multi-blockchain future that I think a lot of people have predicted. And obviously one of my fascinations is Thorchain, and they're on the bleeding edge of this different bridge technology. So I would say the cool thing about what we're doing is that we're just kind of evolving the entire project and the entire economy toward this multi-blockchain future, and it's just kind of unfolding in real time.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the kind of takeaway there that I think a lot of people probably either are terrified of or take for granted is a lot of the time, or up to this point, trying to get one token to another token. It really forced you to think about, what are the best routes? Which platforms do I have to use? Do I have to have an account at this centralized exchange and then use this DEX and then, transfer through this account on Hive that will, take 10 minutes to swap? There was a lot of moving parts there. And I think, it's really kind of to take everything you're saying and kind of cram it down into one little thing is very silly. But there is something so magical about clicking a button and being like, I have this, I want that, go. And that's literally what happens. And it's powered by this infrastructure that you guys have been slowly building outwards from Hive. That is so incredibly valuable. And I think a lot of people are just kind of now starting to realize it. So it'll be really interesting to see the more and more sort of blockchain connections that you guys can make, how many people start turning to the fact that they already know Hive, or they, already know MATIC, or they already know BSC, and that they can trust this service to just do the things they want without forcing them to have to do the rest of the steps, because that's kind of the struggle right now, isn't it? Crypto has a hella learning curve. Big ass learning curve. And each system, each ecosystem has its own. And, again, coming back to that, we're not any ecosystem maximalist. That's important, because if you put those blinders on, you're going to kind of blind yourself to opportunities that arise. And I think that's one of the most sort of magical things about the whole LeoFinance proposition from start to finish, is that there's a huge world out there. It is powered by Web3. It can make you money. It can empower you. It can bring you knowledge. Probably could bring you some friends if you're, one of those crazy internet people. There's a lot of benefits here. Why aren't we chasing them?
Exactly. Yeah, I just to kind of jump on your point, I think it's really cool to see this kind of expansionary value accrual, because when you look at like some of these really successful top 10 cryptocurrencies like Luna, for example, what they're doing is basically accruing value from their UST token, which is their stable coin, and it's essentially they're moving it onto different blockchains and accruing value, and then they're bringing that value back into their own ecosystem. So if you look at LeoFinance kind of on the smaller scale of that, that's essentially what we're doing, where we're going out to these different blockchains, grabbing value and bringing it back into the mothership. And I think what we're doing by proxy is kind of doing that for Hive in a way, where if Leo is successful in grabbing a lot of value and accruing it back to the mothership, then essentially what we're doing is bringing a lot of trading volume, bringing a lot of capital and attention back to Hive itself. So what I think is kind of cool for Hive in this kind of future, this multi-blockchain future, is as this kind of connective source. And obviously that's kind of aided by, fast and free transactions, and Leo Bridge and the adoption of that is really going to be, critical in terms of having that Hive infrastructure. So, I think this whole multi-blockchain future thing is I think it's become kind of a good narrative over the past like 12 months. But before that, there was a little bit of a narrative there. People were talking about interoperability. That was like the buzzword, but
yeah.
Now it's a legit thing. You can move capital across blockchains. You can pool. You can even go into pools that have capital on multiple blockchains at the same time and withdraw to any of those whenever you want. So, the future has kind of arrived in that sense. And I think the blockchains, kind of going broadly, the blockchains that connect themselves to all of the different blockchains and opportunities that are out there are the ones that will accrue the most value. And then going a little bit lower than that and looking at, the smaller ecosystems like LeoFinance, and looking at how a second layer app can basically go out to these blockchains and accrue the value as well. I think that those are going to be the winners long run.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great, it's a great point. And it's something I think that, obviously we look at things from a Hive-centric sort of perspective here. It's something that Hive hasn't always been great at. And that's sort of this whole like decentralized aspect is, okay, we know we need eyeballs, but the eyeballs don't start here. You have to go out and get them. And, you know, in a social sense, that can be really difficult because it's each dApp built on top of Hive that brings users back to Hive. And the social sphere is a weird one right now. There is all of the censorship issues. There is all of the other, oh, good, look at this. We've got a bunch of people hanging out over on the YouTube that we will just do that. There we go. But so the long and the short of it kind of comes back to that, you know, the social stuff we can't necessarily straight up compete on. You will always have these niche groups, kind of like the LeoFinance front end, where people get together and they talk about what they love. But when you start saying, hey, go out to other ecosystems and, you know, take a look at what financial opportunities there are for you, and finding these little pockets of whether it's capital or whether it's value that people want to carry across chains, that is huge. And that's kind of the same process. If you want to find more users, if you need more capital, go to where it is now. There is absolutely nothing stopping us. And so it's always kind of blown my mind that you guys have kind of led the charge on this, and we haven't seen as many projects really following up. Because you're right, this is the future, and this is the only way to kind of help people choose what they like best and what they want to use, and empower them to do it without saying, you know, hey, I'm the best, come deal with my stuff, I promise you, to the moon, etc. No, they will find inherent value in everything that you're building. So, you know, I think that really kind of leads us into PolyCUB, because, you know, Gecko in the chat was just talking a little bit about gas fees and things like that. And so the Polygon ecosystem and MATIC and sort of the idea of using a chain or a second layer that was specifically created to kind of bring fees down, and pairing that with Hive, which has no fees, has really kind of started something that seems to be taking off. I have been seeing tons of articles about PolyCUB. You guys are all over the place. You just got added to dApp Radar. There are a bunch of really good things happening for you. So do you want to talk a little bit about what PolyCUB needs to do and sort of where things are going for you in terms of what PolyCUB is unlocking, both socially and I guess from a financial standpoint?
Yeah. I think, you know, I think something cool that's happened is that a lot of capital has flowed into PolyCUB. You know, it just hit 10 million TVL today, and it keeps growing. And what we're seeing right now is kind of this growth from the outside as well as growth from the inside. So, you know, just kind of on that expansionary note, you know, I do think there's a lot of expansion happening for our community and the total value locked. You know, if you add up the total value locked across, you know, Leo, Cub, and now PolyCUB, there's a lot of value that has been growing there. And obviously PolyCUB's launch brought in a lot of value. So looking at it on that, and then kind of looking at it on that low fee scale and combining it with Hive is a really key point. So, you know, you can essentially, and this is kind of aided by Leo Bridge and PLeo, where you can essentially move funds from Hive to Polygon with, you know, basically, I think the fee that is taken right now is like 1 Leo just to cover gas costs. So it's like under 20 cents typically to move funds to Polygon from Hive. So it's pretty crazy that you can move funds that cheaply. And you know, we had Wrapped Leo. So I think we launched Wrapped Leo around November of 2020, I think. And what was cool about that is that this was kind of the first time where you could take Leo and you could move value onto another blockchain that wasn't Hive. And that was awesome because we got to basically expand out into what was back then DeFi, which was essentially just Uniswap. But obviously gas fees were a headache because, you know, wrapping Leo from Hive to Ethereum cost, you know, like $20 to wrap. And then if you wanted to do any sort of trading with it, it would be like $100 to trade on Uniswap. So now what you're looking at is you can wrap from Hive to Polygon for 20 cents. And then you can trade on Polygon for, say, another 20 cents or less, typically even under a penny in a lot of cases. So this kind of like low fee industry is expanding, and obviously Hive being zero fees is a huge selling point. And I do see Hive as this kind of connective tissue in this kind of broader scale of what's happening.
Yeah. Man, I have so many things from that one kind of blip that I want to chase down. But I guess let's think about sort of Hive as a connective tissue. And it's interesting that you point out that sort of these chains that can't get gas fees under control, they're the ones that are going to be in trouble. I think that's true. Much like anything disruptive, anytime somebody makes it a little bit easier or a little bit cheaper, that's where adoption goes, right? I mean, we hate having money pulled out of our pockets. And I think of it as streaming or, file sharing. These are things that fundamentally changed our mentality and changed the way that we think about value in general, right? Nobody wants to pay for something anymore. We'll just stream it, or we'll just illegally download it. And it's the same thing in the blockchain sort of ecosystem, in the crypto ecosystem, is I could pay high fees, but that sucks. And look at all these other things that don't have high fees. And you just sort of inherently are always looking for what is easiest, what is cheapest, and what is fastest. So, I mean, you have a lot of blockchains that are struggling with fees, that don't necessarily have a good fee structure in place. Do you think that they're going to change or die? Or do you think that's going to become kind of just a part of the branding? Because one thing I've noticed, obviously, luxury branding still exists. There are lots of things, for whatever reason, buck the trend. We still pay more for an experience. Do you think that's kind of valid in the blockchain space? Or do you think it really is going to be cutthroat competitive, and that if you maintain high fees, you will die?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's kind of a mix of all of the above. So I think what's happening right now is you're seeing a lot of, and people have kind of dubbed this whale-fi on Ethereum, because it's so expensive to do anything. So, unless you're moving tens of thousands or even, hundreds of thousands of dollars in each transaction, it's not really worth the gas fees. So this has kind of allowed whales to control different DeFi platforms on Ethereum and essentially earn the yield and kind of almost gatekeep the smaller users out. And essentially what's happening is they're gatekeeping those smaller users, and those smaller users are saying, hey, screw this, I'm going to go over to Polygon or Binance Smart Chain and have low fees and be able to do 100 transactions a day for pennies. So I do think there's a little bit of gatekeeping happening, and potentially like that luxury brand type of aspect. But at the same time, I think you are seeing a lot of capital and attention moving away from things like Ethereum and toward other EVM chains like Polygon and like Binance Smart Chain and Phantom and Avalanche. I think as that continues, Ethereum is going to adapt or likely just become even more of an echo chamber for whale-fi. I don't really see it dying, as it's kind of like the basis of everything. And I think there's plenty of institutions and whales out there that want to play in their own little sandboxes. So I think for them, that's what I was kind of saying about all of the above. I think it could play out a couple different ways, but I kind of expect the Ethereum fees to drop over time from a couple of things. One being innovation, for Ethereum, and obviously when ETH2 is kind of the funny joke. And then I also see that the expansion of Polygon and Binance Smart Chain and all of these EVM forks are actually reducing load on Ethereum, so that the gas fees actually go down a little bit, just to spread out the transactions. So, I think kind of this mixture of layer twos and EVM forks, along with, maybe some technological breakthroughs in block sizing and proof of stake and other things like that, sharding, can actually lead to lower fees on Ethereum itself. But whether or not we get lower fees on Ethereum, I think we're just going to keep seeing adoption of these EVMs, these EVM forks that are very popular.
So, Inertia said something, and it kind of slipped by in the chat, but it's a good question because, like I said, not everybody 1,000% kind of knows how these things work. They just like that they are now entering new ecosystems. So, Inertia was saying that is Polygon a low fee just because it's newer, or is there more to it? Like, so now that we've kind of speculated on whether or not high gas fees will continue into the future, the ones that have low gas fees, we know how Hive works. We have a pretty good idea, and that's sort of its own built-in time and resource fee system that isn't monetary. But so Polygon has very low monetary fees. Is there a way that they kind of make that happen, or sort of what enables Polygon to be low fee?
Yeah, so it's basically, it's kind of interesting because they actually approached it a little bit differently than most EVM forks. But essentially what they've done is create a layer 2 scaling solution. And they're actually it's basically a proof of stake, which most people on Hive are familiar with because we've got delegated proof of stake. So you basically got a set of validators, and then they have all these different side chains that approve the transactions. So it's kind of interesting because essentially it's just allowing that ETH2 vision to happen now, but with these forks of Ethereum in this EVM model. So I do think it's interesting. So no, the fees aren't just lower because it's newer. They're actually lower because it's proof of stake, and even there's some sharding elements to it that essentially most people were waiting for on Ethereum itself, but instead teams like the Polygon team have actually delivered on it faster than ETH2. So I'm seeing people talk about the chain going down and stuff like that, and there's definitely there's definitely this question of how robust is proof of stake versus proof of work, and some various other questions about security. With all of these EVM forks, even Binance. I mean, if you remember the early days of Binance Smart Chain, everyone was just saying, this is just owned by Binance, it's run by Binance, and they're calling it decentralized. So whether or not it's proxy decentralization, I think you could question Ethereum as well, but I think it's probably more decentralized than a lot of these alternatives. And kind of like that value prop of Bitcoin versus other things like Litecoin. Things like Litecoin are faster and more lightweight, and the fees are lower. But then when you look at Bitcoin, it's more robust, more decentralized, more trustworthy. So I think everything's just kind of on this spectrum of various trade-offs. So, in exchange for low fees and fast block times, you have, potentially more security risk than something like Ethereum versus Polygon.
Yeah. And, I think this is obviously something that just is everyday life stuff that we don't necessarily equate to finance. We pick and choose the things, we base sort of what we do day to day and the services we use day to day based on, our own desires, our own ethics, our own goals, whatever. We make those decisions every day unconsciously, but it feels different in a new space like DeFi. So we're constantly kind of thinking these things over. But I mean, I think what the good that's come out of this is, you can kind of move from Hive or in from, say, Polygon to Hive. You're starting to dip your toes in different types of, whether it's proof of stake, proof of work. But in this case, you're testing out all sorts of different flavors of proof of stake. And once again, you're kind of getting exposure to, well, here's the Polygon ecosystem. It runs on fees. It has some downtime, but it is a connection to the wider ETH ecosystem. And here's Hive. It's free and it's fast and it's powering my ability to move between 3 or 4 chains at once. Like, there are certainly reasons why the whole project and the idea of LeoBridge and all of the ways that CubFi and PolyCUB are built allow you to get the best of all worlds, which I think is really important. So it's cool to think about that because, again, these are decisions that not everybody is ready to make, and it kind of empowers you to understand some of these pros and cons a little better. Security and decentralization is one of those topics that obviously we could go on about forever. A lot of people that are in the Hive ecosystem, they want decentralized. They don't want anything centralized. And one of the things that's been very interesting is seeing how, sort of a centralized dApp built on top of a truly decentralized infrastructure can allow projects to really flourish, can allow people to feel a little more comfortable, and almost kind of, I don't want to say bring some legitimacy or validity to centralized projects, but it's the truth. Centralized aspects to anything aren't inherently bad. And in a lot of ways, they allow you to give almost sort of a better experience to a user. So, I mean, that's kind of, something like, say, LeoFinance, where you're using the Hive blockchain, truly decentralized, immutable, censorship-resistant infrastructure, but you're building a front end that is curated, that is, in a lot of ways, has centralized control to build the best user experience. We haven't talked a lot about LeoFinance as the social and, information sharing side of this whole project. How are you finding that it fits into all of the options that you're building for financial gain? How do you find the social community and the LeoFinance site as a hub? How's that kind of playing into it?
Yeah. I mean, it's cool to see that, basically this vision that started out as a Web3 seeking alpha kind of evolved from that into, talking about different opportunities in crypto and then actually creating those opportunities, like I was saying before. So, in terms of the social side, that's kind of, and if you go into the white paper, that's like the layer zero, and a lot of people on Hive talk about that and the value of essentially having that hardcore, never going to leave type of community. And that's what we've got with Leo and LeoFinance with the community. And essentially what we've created is you've got this social layer in the middle, and then all these branches like CUB and PolyCUB are just essentially just bringing in value to that middle layer. And basically, not just giving people the chance to talk about opportunity and share opportunity with each other, but essentially, learn all these different EVM chains and learn how all this technology works. And what we've basically done is create like this supercharged Web3 community where, all the different opportunities are just, everyone's got equal opportunity to the same things that are happening across DeFi, across, the social layer. So, what we're really focused on in terms of LeoFinance and the social part of it is, rolling out the mobile app and rolling out the desktop app and updates to each one of them, just making them easier to use. And, in the last 2 or 3 months, we added Facebook Lite accounts,
Nice.
And we call them Lite accounts because, it's cool. And we call them Lite accounts because essentially, the user is logging in with their Facebook account, and we have Leo Infra on the back end, which is essentially taking their Web2 login, and Leo Infra is creating them a Hive account, and it's a legitimate Hive account. So I call them Lite accounts with quotes because it's a full Hive account. The Lite part of it is that they don't have the keys unless they choose to download them. So the kind of interesting point of that is that, when a new user comes in, they don't want to have this huge learning curve right away. They want to, you want to let them do as much as possible without a lot of work at the jump. So, if we can get people in and get them commenting and upvoting and even making posts and earning crypto like Leo and Hive, without even having to download keys, without having to learn, what's a posting key, what's an active key, what's a master key, instead of giving them all of that up front, we can basically, backload all that stuff, let them do all the fun stuff first, get them hooked on it, and then teach them about the keys and how, the Hive blockchain works and how, your keys, your crypto, take control of your data, and all of your content and followers. So what we're doing with LeoFinance is kind of creating that desktop portal to Web3 and making it easy to use. And then Leo Mobile, we're kind of taking this interesting direction where we're making it so easy to log in and so easy to use that the focus on the user experience is not even to create posts, it's to actually read posts, comment on posts, and upvote posts. So Leo Mobile is really targeting more of a lurker, if you will.
Yeah.
It's kind of looking for all the lurkers of the internet, which, for every one content creator, there's 1,000 lurkers. So,
Yes.
Yeah. So Leo Desktop is really focused on the creator. Leo Mobile is focused on the lurker.
Man, okay. I mean, mad props. And you probably hear this a lot, but that's fine. I'm a pump your tires. I'm so stoked to do that. Holy crap. We talk about this a lot, in an ecosystem that is full of wannabe creators. Not everybody is, and there's such a workload that comes along with that. And I will be the first to just kind of say my crypto journey did not prepare me for how hard the internet is. I know that sounds ridiculous, but when I came to Hive, I was like, I take cool photos. I'm going to show people pictures. I'm going to make a bunch of posts. It's going to be the neatest. Look at me. I'm going to have a cool blog. That was where I started. As you've noticed, things have changed a little bit. And the more sort of fascinated I became with the idea of blockchain and a lot of the sort of sovereign aspects of cryptocurrency and Hive in general, obviously my journey changed. I started node running. I started, doing advocacy. I started doing outreach. And now a lot of my focus really is on that portion of it. And it turns out I don't have a lot of time to be a content creator in the way that I used to be. But of course, I'm still always checking feeds. I'm still always scrolling through. I'm still always dropping little likes here and there. That's manageable. And so it's so smart to start thinking about what's manageable for people, what's enjoyable for people. In social right now, what are people doing that, keeps them on a site? Those are the aspects that should be recreated because that's what people want. That's what people enjoy. And how do you build a community that content creators want to come to because it's bustling without kind of courting the content consumer? And we've never really had a lot of projects that thought that way, which is really cool. Because that's sort of what the internet is all about. Yeah, it's synchronous communication and that you can write and you can read simultaneously, but most people just want to read. How do you encourage those people to read what it is that you're focusing on? So this is mobile app, consumer focused, and kind of luring them in and then using their existing socials to easily launch them onto Hive is a really smart tactic. So I guess the question becomes, do we have a when? Is it a soon? Is it a Khal soon? Soon.tm?
Yeah. It's as with everything, it's all in the Sooniverse, and it's to be determined by the calendar. But yeah, the mobile app is out and it's actually in beta, so people can download it on Apple Test Flight and the Google Play Store. Mm-hmm. I think where it's going to start to get interesting is with our next couple updates, because right now we're calling it pre V1, and then we're going to move into V1, which will be kind of the full App Store listing. And before we get to that V1 stage, which I'm kind of hoping to do in the next couple of weeks. I want to kind of fulfill that kind of little mission statement I gave you, which is that, it's going to be Leo Mobile is going to be very consumer focused. There's going to be a way to make a post from Leo Mobile, but it's not going to be very present on the UI necessarily. It's going to be definitely, people are going to log in and they're going to be directed to read the curated list of posts and make a comment and upvote, and this is how you earn Leo. It's actually by upvoting and creating comments. It's not necessarily by creating content. And then on the flip side of that, when you log into desktop and click get started on desktop, it's going to take you through this little process that's going to show you how to create a post and basically create content and distribute it. So really going in on those 2 key points. So it's long story short, it's all in the Sooniverse, but hopefully sooner than later.
Fair enough. It's almost like you've put a lot of thought into this. It's crazy how that works. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on chat, and it's funny because they're listening and they're interacting, but they're also kind of gone off on a tangent. And one of the things obviously that's being discussed there and kind of branched off from our earlier discussion about decentralization was that, and I think it was Colonel, I've lost the chat scroll here, but I think it was Colonel that was saying, well, there is no true decentralization. There really is only degrees of it, and it's sort of degrees of separation from whatever authority point is controlling something. And so chat right now is discussing the idea of obviously ISPs are kind of at the top of that food chain. Your internet service provider can decide to cut off your internet, and then it doesn't matter what kind of infrastructure you're using. Obviously, your access has been choked. And so what everybody in chat's talking about is whether it's mesh nets, it's radio, peer-to-peer internet. Do you think, we're just going to go philosophical and then we'll come back again. Do you think that's a viable thing? Never before in our history have we ever really discussed the next step past decentralized, finance, decentralized information sharing, all of that. We're like, yeah, we're all going to use Bitcoin and we've got our own money. Yeah, we're all going to post on Hive and no one can take our words away from us. And there's truth in that. And then there's also obviously that murky point of, well, if you don't have the internet, you're not doing any of that. Do you think we're headed towards a future where more and more people are learning about self-sovereign and decentralized options, and that people will want to create a true or a closer to true peer-to-peer decentralized mesh network? The only one that I know of right now that's really obviously happening without, whether or not people realize it, is Amazon Sidewalk. Everybody has an Amazon device. Most people don't know how to opt out. Amazon is building the world's largest and most interconnected mesh network just by dint of having cheap, in-home assistants and pieces of hardware. But do you think there's a chance that just regular people can kind of band together and create the infrastructure that continues to sort of hold up these values of peer-to-peer value transaction, peer-to-peer information transaction, and a truly decentralized ledger?
Yeah. I have two big points for that. I think, the first one is that, what's going on in the world right now, globally, and, with different economies, with different, social issues, with, even look at what's happening, Russia, Ukraine, all of this stuff is basically kind of enlightening. This is nothing new, right? It's all happened before. We're watching history replay itself continuously. Mm-hmm. Empires fight each other, and they're always struggling for power. They're always taking advantage of their citizens, and that's just history on repeat. So what we're seeing now, though, is that we all have the internet, and we all have this way to talk to each other about what's happening. And there's videos of people on the ground in Ukraine showing what it's actually like to be there, and that's very different. It's a very different world than even 20 years ago. When people were in very similar situations but couldn't share it with the world. So. That's kind of my first point with that is enlightening the world to what's happening in real time with what happens when there's too much power in big government and big tech and big corporations. I think that's kind of taking place, and that's kind of giving people the motivation and the why for moving in a decentralized way. And I think it's moving people into Bitcoin, it's moving people into crypto, and it's moving people toward that kind of blockchain ledger distributed system. My second point to that is and my second reason why I think we're moving more and more in that direction is tokenization. And I think what's cool is that, in this idea of a future decentralized distributed internet where it's run by, small nodes all over the place, where anyone can run one in their living room and essentially just democratizing that basically the access to internet completely. And you look at even what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink and all of this different stuff. What's getting cool is this tokenization thing that has become possible because of crypto is actually creating. So we've created the why, we've created the motivation with things like what's happening in the global, political landscape right now. And then you've created the how, which is the tokenization and basically the incentivization to create these decentralized architectures. So I do think we're moving. I think right now we're closer than we've ever been, and I obviously think we're just going to keep getting closer to more distribution and decentralization.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's certainly been weird and interesting because, obviously for people our age, we have always been living through wars, but not the same way that sort of, say, our grandparents or older generations lived through wars. And a lot of that comes back to what you're saying is we've never really had a good way to quickly disseminate information from anybody who might just want to share the place and time that they're at any second. And it's been really interesting to see that the fog of war has changed. And we are now in a world where, McDonald's pulls out and everybody's threatening to send Bitcoin and somebody makes a meme token. And in fact, the entire frontal assault for both sides in a conflict is a bunch of nerdos sitting at their computer creating dank memes. It's a weird space to be in. It is a strange world to occupy. And again, there's no going back. Yeah, Mariano's saying it's the beginning of a new era. There are people waving at us on Theta. Hi, guys. We're only about halfway through the show. And man, we've touched on a lot of stuff already. It's kind of cool to be able to kind of have this big meandering discussion. But yeah, it will be really fascinating to see at what point people get fed up enough to really pursue the difficult options of running their own infrastructure. And when you come back to tokenization or sort of that personal connection to this, to kind of driving decentralization, it kind of makes me think a little bit more about crypto again. And, one of the things that's always been really interesting, controversial, however you want to put it, is that proof of stake, proof of work, proof of anything, any consensus algorithm or system requires someone to run nodes. Now, maybe in the world, people aren't ready to kind of put up hardware to create a homegrown pirate global internet, but, how important do you think is it for people to be able, and yes, and then after this, I promise, I've been watching chat. I see lots of comments and questions. We'll hit those. Listen, we're having fun talking, you guys. How important do you think it's going to be for people to get into node running, whether that's cloud nodes, whether that's actual hardware, whether that's at a, data center somewhere? Do you think that that's the goal, is to help draw people more and more into the provider side of things? Or do you think it really should be, we incentivize probably the most tech savvy and a large number of them, but we let most people just do the transacting?
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, I think it's kind of interesting because, you can basically overlay what we were just talking about with the creator and consumer kind of ratio and say, okay, well, then there's going to be also the operator and the user again, where you have and transactor, it would be another way to put the user. I think it's going to be a similar ratio where you're going to have, creators used to be just media companies. Big media companies obviously had a lot of technology and capability to create and distribute content. And now anybody, I mean, look at us, we're just, in our houses creating and distributing content. So, that setup is just going to be overlaid onto, basically creating this architecture and running this architecture. Very similar setup, in my opinion. So I think it's extremely important that more and more people run nodes and do stuff like that. I don't think that it's going to be at the point where like every single person who's using the network needs to run a node. I know there are some blockchains and some people that believe in kind of, literally, if you're using the network, you have to run a node. I think that's overkill. I think you need a lot of distribution. You need a lot of block producers. You need a lot of, node operators, but you don't need everybody running one. That's just, my grandma doesn't need to run a node. So I do think it's important, but I do think there's a limit to that. So, and I do think it's getting a lot easier. And I don't know, I think it's probably a mix of people getting smarter and the technology getting easier to use because, people are a lot more inclined to run nodes and be able to run them through cloud computing or through, having a box in their house.
Yeah. Okay. So we had a quick blip in the Discord, but that's okay. Listen, guys, I'm not going to force him. I'm not going to force him to repeat himself because, of course, I'll throw this out here since we're at the halfway point. Yeah, there's a ton of people in the Discord, but I can see there are a lot of people hanging out over. We've got Vim TV running right now, which is the Hive-powered streaming. We have Twitch, we have Theta, we have Trovo, and we have the YouTube. So everybody's coming in from everywhere, and it's bumping today. If you want to watch or listen to this again, if you want to have, all of these enlightening tidbits just circulating through your mind, no problem. You can watch it again after. So A-okay. Also, I just want to say it would be pretty boss if your grandma ran a Hive node. I'm just saying that would be pretty baller, honestly. So I'm going to try and kind of go back because there were a lot of different things happening in the chat. And yeah, so now we've done the philosophical thing. And of course, I know it's probably going to chase you to the ends of the earth. There are some Project Blank questions. Do you want to talk a little bit about Project Blank? I will say maybe while you collect your thoughts on what you want to say about Project Blank, there was a little bit of feedback. Kitty Girl was saying that she really appreciates your Leopedia. So for people who don't necessarily know, you guys have put together a whole sort of wiki-style resource center for all things Leo, all things LeoFinance. But one of the things that she was suggesting is that, yeah, there are a lot of people, like we'll say me, not necessarily like her, but that she also does a lot of outreach to these brand new users who are just experiencing DeFi. And that could you maybe even create one page that's like DeFi for dummies. Let's take a lot of the scary terminology that comes along with these financial sort of opportunities. And can you kind of create a page that's straight up, I've never done this before. Help me figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. And do you think that's kind of your niche, or do you think maybe somebody at an intermediary point? Because I feel like you guys are well poised to kind of be baby's first DeFi, and then also be, able to kind of grow with the user. Or somebody who comes in who is maybe a member of sort of the WhaleFi cabal, who is experimenting with all sorts of ecosystems, comes in here, is really experienced, can also just hop in and be treated as a regular user. I mean, I feel like you guys are poised to kind of be there every step of the way. So Kitty Girl's just saying, like, do you think that you could create sort of a landing page, a funnel, a part of Leopedia that would be straight up a for dummies page?
Yeah. I think, and I've wanted to, some people may have seen on Leo Twitter and other places that I've wanted to kind of do a circle back to Leopedia and make it, expand the resource and get more people involved in posting content on it and kind of making it, turning it into more of a Wikipedia where people can submit and get content approved. And I do think we're going to circle back and head in that direction with a lot of things. And I think a DeFi for dummies would be a great idea. Kind of going back to that earlier point I made where I was saying, we've got a very diversified group of people on LeoFinance. You've got people who've never touched DeFi still. You've got people who are, just getting into DeFi. CUB was their first hit. Now they're on PolyCUB and they're learning more. And then you've got people who are, WhaleFi and kind of OG DeFi users who were on Binance Smart Chain, a year or so ago, and we're learning about all the opportunities there. And this interesting kind of melting pot of skill levels is creating essentially an environment where anybody can jump into LeoFinance at any stage of knowledge and kind of learn about not just DeFi, but everything, related to the crypto industry. So, I do think Leopedia is going to play a massive role in the future of essentially organizing the content that you see on LeoFinance into more, evergreen buckets where people can jump into.
Yes, I love that. That's something that we haven't really talked about much is like, hey, not only do you have a built-in bootstrapped community who is just eager to try out the things that you build, you have help. I mean, have you thought much about sort of bounty? Well, I mean, I know you have, but like for the sake of our conversation here, have you thought much about mobilizing this army of ravenous sort of financial creators? You have DAO options, you can have bounty options, you can have, you've got this select group of authors that are not just knowledgeable in your niche, but who are interested in your project specifically. Have you thought a little bit about sort of basically taking advantage of the people in the ecosystem to help you do the teaching?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to go about that. One thing we've done, I think, really well is with the curation team and with different community members like Taskmaster. Taskmaster runs the Daily Leo, which is our newsletter that goes out 2 times a week. He runs the newsletter entirely on his own, and he's not a team member. He's just a community member that has kind of stepped up into a community leader role. So basically what we're really getting at is kind of distributing the different power dynamics of Leo. And I do think we've done that pretty well with a lot of things like Leo, the Daily Leo newsletter. There's JK6276 is running Leo Alpha, which is kind of like a subset of Leo that kind of looks for alpha generating ideas as investments in the crypto space. And then like I said, I really want to do a circle back to Leopedia and get a bunch of different authors involved from LeoFinance and get them submitting content to Leopedia specifically, and then getting it reviewed. Essentially the same way Wikipedia works. So yeah, I think that our power and that layer 0 idea, our power as a community has really grown as the community has grown. Our ability to get things done and kind of expand, the way that everything goes. And we just hired on a head of marketing, head of business development. And in terms of a team, we're expanding. In terms of a community, we're expanding. And the goal is really just to continue that and kind of, utilize the different levers that we have. There's financial leverage, there's, community leverage, there's technological leverage with the software we built. And, the combination and the culmination of all those things is the true power of what Leo can accomplish.
It is, it's wild. And you know what? Yeah, you're right. You guys have done a really good job. You're one of the communities that really does keep an eye on people posting inside and outside of the community about Leo. You guys you're the first to kind of share people's articles and take them wider, things that are maybe posted on Hive, take them out wider and sort of not just help that content creator get a bit of a boost in terms of, eyes on their work, but also, looking and working a little bit smarter and not necessarily harder and saying, well, you know what, maybe we didn't have anything on the docket for today, but holy cow, this is a great article. Boom. Let's share it with people. So yeah, you guys have done a really good job with that. And it is, I feel like a lot of the time you guys really are understanding all of the benefits and how to leverage them well. And it's like, it didn't just bring you here to, gosh, I'm going to have to find something to complain to you about by the time this, this show is over. I've got an hour. I'll find something to complain about. But I'm really impressed because for the first time, you guys, and I think it's because you've kind of grown up in the ecosystem, so to speak. For the first time, you're really starting to think about all of the moving pieces and then kind of building a big machine out of them. And I think it's really impressive. So, kudos to you. So yeah, in chat, everybody is kind of talking about this. I am laughing because Patrick kind of jumped in and was like, hell yeah, grandma's running nodes. So, I mean, that idea is not going away. But I guess we could come back to Project Blank. And, there are probably a lot of people who are like, I don't know what that is. That's confusing. And there are probably some people who are quite literally salivating at the idea of Project Blank. So do you wanna talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, Project Blank is this infamous project that we've been working on in the background of what we've got all these like you were saying, we got all these moving pieces, and we're looking for ways to kind of culminate them and build everything. And what we've basically realized is that in building a lot of this technology for LeoFinance specifically, and Leo Mobile, and the technology like Leo Infra and Leo Lightning Network, basically taking all of this technology, expanding it, maturing it, making it work better, making it more efficient and more effective. What we've kind of learned is that all this technology built together, and we're kind of building up to this point where we can basically release Project Blank, which is essentially just a decentralized Twitter. It's basically the Web3 version of Twitter that I think everyone's been waiting for. And a lot of people on Hive have gotten banned on Twitter, shadow banned on Twitter. And the need for a Web3 Twitter where you can't get banned, where you can't get censored, I think is a big deal. Kind of the annoying thing about other Twitter, clones that have come out, and there's all sorts of different ones. They kind of become just a melting pot for people to talk about, things that you can't talk about on Twitter. So it basically just becomes like the anti-Twitter. I think what we're really going to be focused on is, obviously crypto is probably going to have a huge section of that, crypto Twitter. A big thing that we're going to do is just target crypto Twitter influencers and try to migrate them over to Project Blank. And I do think that's going to be a big deal, but obviously we want to get more like normal content on there, and we want to make it, we don't want to be anti-Twitter. We want to be, the reason why you left Twitter for something that is the same content, but now it's all tokenized and on Web3 and immutable. So that's kind of really the overview key big idea of Project Blank. And obviously I already know people will say when, and they'll ask that, and the answer is soon, but the real key is that we are building the technology, and as we push out updates to Leo Mobile and Leo Lightning and Leo Infra, those are the updates that lead to Project Blank. So if you want to know when, then just look at the soons that become nows for things that are key technology.
I love it. When with soon's moving to nows is when was then, but then is now. Yeah, nailed it. Okay, so you said something in there that like immediately my ears kind of went like, pew! And that is that so far, one of the things we've struggled with in that, well, man, we need a decentralized Twitter, we need a decentralized YouTube. Like, here are all these sort of big players in the information space that control social interactions, but they don't just control social interactions. They literally control us socially. And they do that, whether it is shadow banning is probably one of the sort of most insidious ways that happens. You don't even know, you don't see it. There's no indicator, but all of a sudden your voice just kind of drops off in the void, and people that you were communicating with disappear, and these voluntary or consensual relationships all of a sudden are severed, and there's really nothing to let you know. And that the mystery and the sort of discomfort surrounding that, and the way that you can shape perception, narrative, relationships with that control is staggering, really. And it just, there's no indicator of it, which is almost the most insidious thing. But one thing that you said that kind of really resonated with me is that we have not yet seen an alternative that doesn't just become a place to kind of, say things you're not supposed to say. And that's great. That's important. Like, if I cannot say on Facebook that knitted tea cozies are way better than crocheted tea cozies. I should have a place to say that. But the reality is if just me and a bunch of ravenous, insane old knitting bats get together and take over a new platform and just start screaming about tea cozies, nobody else wants to go there. You know what I mean? And so how is it that you buck the trend of every sort of alternative social site, alternative information sharing site, alternative content creation site? And alternative is a weird word, but we'll call it that because it's not good to kind of lump them into a tribe, a political affiliation, whatever. But that's what happens to every single one. We have not yet seen any successful alternative. And that's going to be difficult. So I'm liking the idea of trying to find groups that mesh with your sort of core subject matter, your core value propositions, and bringing them over just to talk there normally, but with the expanded benefits of also knowing that there is immutability and censorship resistance, because then, where somebody goes to talk about crypto, but then they also maybe talk about the lunch they had, and then they start sharing pictures of their cat, and then also, give some recommendations for music, and then political topic, and then friendships. And, do you think when Project Blank arrives, will it be really financial forward, do you think? Or is it that you kind of just want to focus on that bucking of the big data control kind of trend?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I think it's kind of one of those things where, we have theories and we have, a hypothesis of what's going to happen. But I think, in practice, it could be a lot different. And I think it's just really going to depend on who picks it up and kind of where it goes from there. I do have a feeling that it's going to be very heavily financially focused in the beginning. I think a lot of people are going to be very focused on crypto Twitter, crypto finance, stuff like that. I think that is going to kind of be our first demographic that we pull in and cater to. But then, going out and grabbing some influencers, grabbing some knitting influencers and creating a knitting community on Project Blank and kind of, going out to food bloggers, creating a food blogging community on Project Blank. That's going to be, it's going to start small, and then you're going to see kind of those key pillars, basically those key opinion leaders that we kind of put into place and incentivize to move over from their centralized platforms. They're going to kind of lead the charge into expanding the community from 0 to 1 to 100. And yeah, so I do see it starting very financially heavily focused and then kind of expanding out from there. And a lot of that just has to do with the Leo community, and it's going to be very, essentially everyone on Leo is going to go to Project Blank first. So the first adopters are going to be finance focused. Yeah. And then I do think it's going to kind of unfold from there.
Yeah. And I'm just watching the chat here, and there's a couple of comments sort of in line with this. And one that Marco was pointing out was Elon the other day was actually essentially, without saying in as many words, when, Khal, when Project Blank, when is there a form of Twitter that will kind of hit all these points and allow us to get back to why so many people are on Twitter now? Most people that are on Twitter now are not just joining and being excited by what they find. Most people have been there for a really long time and are lamenting what they're losing. And it's a really interesting dynamic that all of these sort of social giants that especially kind of at the middling age that many people here are at, we have lived most of our lives with this crazy rocket ride of increasing users, increasing valuations, increasing everything. And that's not the case in the past couple years. It's the first time that we've really seen these behemoths start tapering off a little bit, but there's just nothing else. So, I mean, it's interesting because even if there isn't, specific Project Blank advertising, because obviously when is when. But Epic Fail's asking how old we are, because I guarantee you there will be someone really young and someone really old in the chat who's like, I'm not who you're talking about. But I'm in my mid-30s, moving on towards 40. I don't know. You're probably a spring chicken.
24.
Yeah, see, you're a fucking baby. Jesus, Murphy Jones. All right, so it doesn't matter. All of us that are here that are using a computer have seen sort of the wild ride that was Facebook / now Meta, and, you know, Twitter that is now like, I mean, even Jack's kind of like, yeah, whatever, peace out, Twitter. But there has to be something valuable in someone as sort of unpredictable and intelligent and troll-esque as Elon saying, hey, think about a Twitter that isn't Twitter. Like, you know, is that sort of, do you think that him saying these things, people will start ignoring him because it's a little bit cry wolf or pants on fire? Or do you think like he's actually planting the seeds for what you guys are building?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happening, you know, and you know, again, kind of pulling on that previous conversation we had about people running nodes and basically global politics and corporations and big tech and big government, kind of, they're doing all the marketing that we need for stuff like Project Blank.
Yeah.
You know, they're kind of they're putting the nail in their own coffin and essentially just they're just seeding the ground for what's going to take over, which is going to be Web3 decentralized versions of social media. And obviously I think you could look at like this EVM chain revolution and what's happening with kind of these forks of Ethereum that are then leading into, you know, these different opportunities for people. I think you can look at that and see what's going to happen with social media, where I think you're going to have kind of like this Ethereum of the decentralized social media aspect. So there's going to be, you know, the first one is going to come along and it's going to change everything. People are going to finally see, you know, what can be built on Web3. And then, you know, from there, you're actually going to see a lot of forks. You're going to see a lot of iterations come out. And you know, it's kind of like, I think Addicted posted, you know, an image of the difference between decentralization and distribution, and basically a distributed network versus a decentralized network. And I think what we're going to see is kind of that same spectrum be overlaid onto Web3 and kind of the destruction of Web2 and the advent of Web3, I think is going to look very similar to, you know, what's happening with EVM chains. So for people like Elon, I think, you know, that first solution is going to come out. It's going to become a big deal. And then, you know, there's going to be thousands of iterations right after it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. There's always somebody that sort of manages to break that glass and then everything kind of spills forth. So, I mean, I want to kind of jump back to some of the stuff that is happening versus that is happening in the background alongside your focus now. But Inertia did ask a question. And I thought maybe, okay, this is cool to touch on, because he was saying, oh, is there any IPFS technology in Project Blank? Because IPFS has kind of been one of those things where people kind of quasi understand what it does. It's a buzzword, you know, NFT, the NFT space kind of really brought the idea of IPFS to the front of a lot of people's minds, but they don't necessarily really understand it. So you'll hear people who have an NFT be like, yeah, it's on IPFS, but they never pinned it, or they don't understand trash collection or whatever. So, you know, have you thought a little bit about some of these infrastructure aspects, or, you know, file backup, redundancy aspects? Because when we talk about censorship resistance and immutability, that sort of idea of redundance is really important. And we have obviously that layer 0, Hive is there, and the ledger is distributed and everybody's got a copy. But of course, you know, as you're talking about these sort of multi-chain maximalist solutions, how do you start looking at, yes, we have crazy decentralized, you know, immutability on this chain, and we're pairing that with something else? You know, have you thought a little bit about integrating IPFS or some more sort of broadening these decentralized backups or distribution of Project Blank?
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at it with this multi-chain kind of maximalist view of you know, everything's going to be on multiple blockchains, everything's going to be connected to each other and have a seamless bridge over from one to another. I think the same is going to be for all of these different social solutions. So, the way that Project Blank works is it's actually a second layer on top of Hive where
Yes.
all the data is still stored on the Hive blockchain, and anyone can spin up a second layer node and basically read that same data and output it any way that they want. What I think is going to happen is, just speaking from the way that Project Blank is going to work, it's going to be that second layer and it's going to be on Hive. And then if another solution comes along and it is usable and it can be plugged in with a second layer, I do think you're going to see that second layer be built so it's in this space where it's also on Hive and it's also on another chain. I don't know about, with redundancy, it can be interesting that people are like creating backups and stuff. That's kind of interesting, but I think what's going to be more beneficial is going to be kind of this like parallel layer 2 that works on multiple, essentially that works on multiple blockchains simultaneously.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's arguably having that approach to it is easier than on IPFS because, again, we come back to, should everybody be able to run a node? Should everybody understand pinning? Should everybody be part of that file sharing system? Or do you just need a good ratio of providers to users? Okay, so we've been talking about Project Blank for a bit, and, there are some gentle nudges back in chat to kind of bounce back to PolyCUB. And that's probably a good place to go because, again, PolyCUB is pretty exciting. I mean, I am always going to be speaking from the probably not quite doing it right side of things. But again, like I can say, I like the idea of coming in, claiming my airdrops, staking. There is this relationship between, PolyCUB and ex-PolyCUB. And, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because one of the things that you've mentioned time and again, and that has been in sort of all your publications, is this is going to be the best and the easiest and sort of the most forward-thinking yield optimizer there are. And I bet 50% of people who are watching this, listening to this, engaging with this are like, I don't know what a yield optimizer is. How do I get more tokens?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good, it's a good question. Like, in terms of a yield optimizer, it's exactly what it sounds like. You can earn yield on DeFi, you can pool assets, and essentially just optimize what you can basically optimize number go up, and you can essentially take this idea of earning yield on your digital assets, and then a yield optimizer will just go out and look for the best opportunities and grab that yield and bring it back to you. When we talk about PolyCUB being the best yield optimizer that's out there, this is a theory that we have that obviously needs to play out over the coming weeks and months. But essentially what we've aimed to do is create a sustainable yield optimizer where anyone can buy PolyCUB, stake it as ex-PolyCUB, and essentially just sit in that vault and not do anything. And,
yes.
and I did a podcast with John G. Olson, and one thing he was saying is that he likes the idea of like a Cub Kingdom or a PolyCUB,
yes.
ex-PolyCUB vault, where literally he just buys one thing, stakes it in a vault, and just checks it every once in a while, and it goes up, and it's more valuable, and he's earning yield on it. And that's kind of where we're at with what we're trying to build. So, with ex-PolyCUB, I think it's going to be, I just released a post this morning actually talking about kind of the future of PolyCUB and ex-PolyCUB, yes. and how it's actually sustainable. Because I know a lot of people question, if it will actually reach the sustainable numbers that we've kind of outlaid for it, and kind of have basically created like predictive models trying to figure out when does this thing become sustainable, how sustainable is it, and how does it grow over time. And I think that's all yet to be seen, but it's also, the numbers are on track and kind of playing out in a certain way that makes us pretty confident about it. So things like protocol owned liquidity and bonding and collateralized lending with ex-PolyCUB stake. These are all culminating into this idea that we've created the first truly sustainable yield optimizer where, right now the APY, this morning the APY was something ridiculous on ex-PolyCUB. It was like 250,000%. APY for buying and staking PolyCUB. That's not going to be there for the next 10 years, right? You can't sustain that. The key is we've built it so that it has this early on, so a lot of people can own the token. It can distribute widely. And then, 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, we want it to look like you've put money into PolyCUB and XPolyCUB, and now it's earning like 30% or 40% or 50% a year APY. And you don't have to worry about it. And then if you've got Bitcoin, you've got extra Ethereum, you can pool it on Kingdoms and not worry about it. And it's earning yield that isn't, fluctuating all over the place. That's kind of the key vision that we're tackling with PolyCUB, is to create an actually sustainable and reliable yield optimizer. And essentially that just means a landscape where anyone can deposit capital and earn a return on the Polygon blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that idea because, of course, for a lot of us, you started off in crypto and DeFi wasn't a thing, as you mentioned. So it was hodl. Just hodl. Just clutch it to your chest to never let it go. And there are so many people who still have that mentality. So how do you say, yeah, that's a good mentality, but also do that and get this? And that's a really viable option. And so, yeah, you're right. Having an ecosystem that allows you, you can jump into liquidity, and you can start, providing collateral for lending and such. But you also just have the option to just stake some tokens, just put them in, just sit on them the way that you always were, and then come back and there's a surprise. That's very, very attractive to people who are risk averse. And it, weirdly enough, surprisingly enough, not everyone in crypto is a wild degen. I mean, I'm just learning that myself, but there are people in this space who are actually very concerned and very, I guess, conservative in the way that they look at a lot of what's happening in the crypto space. New projects jump up every day. Everybody's getting rug pulled. Everything is, not. I do. And Epic Fail, I wanna jump on something else that you said too, but he's teasing me that I don't say like decentralized finance, DeFi. I said it's DeFi. And yeah, you know what? It's true. It's not just my weird bad Canadian ways, of saying things. It is. There is a defiance here. There is absolutely a resistance and a pushback against the existing financial structure and the fact that in a lot of the economic aspects of our lives, we don't have as much control as we would like. And there's this constant handoff of more sort of responsibility on our own shoulders and more freedom with our finances. And everybody has to balance that. But the other thing that Epic Fail mentioned a little bit above gets a little bit deeper into some of the PolyCUB stuff. And that's probably where a lot of the people that are jumping in now and a lot of the people that are listening are really focused on. Is sort of the bread and butter of the PolyCUB token, the XPolyCUB, and some of the things that you've mentioned, like bonding. Hey, I don't know what that is. You can definitely explain that to me. But he mentioned that he wants to know if this is if the XPolyCUB token will be franchisable for other tokens.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that could mean a couple of different things. I think what he's referring to is this idea that we've talked about in the Leo AMAs, which is once we see how PolyCUB plays out and see if it's, super successful in the way that we think it will be and sustainable, what we have as an idea is to create it and basically turn it into an outpost and say, okay, PolyCUB worked and it's a sustainable DeFi yield optimizer. You can essentially use it for the next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years and earn yield on the Polygon network. And this is like the home base for basically optimizing yield on Polygon, not just for our community, but also for the broader DeFi community that starts to learn about LeoFinance through PolyCUB. The idea is then to take that model and kind of outpost it to these other blockchains like Phantom, Avalanche, Terra, and essentially create the same platform on these other blockchains and then connect them all through Leo Bridge. So
that's wild.
Yeah, it's gonna be It's going to be an interesting world. Obviously, this PolyCUB experiment needs to play out, and we need to see that it is successful, and what works, what doesn't work, and what needs to be fixed, and essentially, I think we're on track to see PolyCUB achieve its mission of being that fully sustainable yield optimizer that is self-sustainable and isn't just kind of like the other yield optimizers where the token just dies out over time. PolyCUB is designed to essentially be so scarce of an asset. There's only going to be 7.2 million of them that will ever exist. And when you combine that scarcity with utility, and that utility comes in the form of XPolyCUB, bonding, protocol liquidity, collateralized lending. When you combine all those aspects of utility and scarcity, we're going to kind of see this experiment play out. And I think, between now and the July-August timeframe, we're going to see how successful PolyCUB is in becoming this fully sustainable yield optimizer. And provided that we achieve what we set out to achieve, then you're going to kind of see this outpost idea take hold. And that's a really exciting future to me, where Leo Bridge is connected to Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, Hive, Phantom, Avalanche, Terra, Thorchain. All these different blockchains are connected through Leo Bridge. And then you've got these PolyCUB outposts on each chain that's kind of supercharging it and allowing our community to go from, one blockchain to another and optimize yield with their assets. So that future is really, really cool to think about.
Yeah, it is. And again, even Bluefins just jumped in and just saying, well, I didn't even know what a yield optimizer was. So, there you go. It's where we started this whole sort of PolyCUB segment. And that is something that I'm excited for, because again, for me, where I don't necessarily go seeking new blockchains, especially for financial opportunities, like, well, that's a big FOMO on my part. But there's something inherently valuable about testing, proving, understanding, and sort of connecting from this first outpost. What a great term for it. And then once you've kind of got this one under your belt, each subsequent one becomes a little bit easier, because you know what you're looking for. The only real difference is just sort of the unique integration aspects, whatever their API looks like or whatnot. So I love that this is sort of one of those, it gets easier and easier and easier. And again, it kind of snowballs as you go. But it begins to offer so many more options for people without effort. And I think that's really the key thing. Without effort for the user, you obviously have to do a little bit of work every now and again. But for the user, it gets a little easier and a little easier. I wish I got into Avalanche. Man, I never did. I don't understand. But I can jump into a pool, or I can do a swap here. Okay, cool. And I feel like that's going to mitigate a lot of sort of some of the FOMO-ish aspects that will always be in the crypto space. No matter what token you're in, no matter how committed you are to your own goals and wants and needs, something shiny will come up. And you will be like, oh, I have to learn about it. I have to get into it. And having this sort of all-in-one financial hub where you can pick and choose some curated options across strong blockchains built by a team who have now been around for like 4 or 5 years, tested and battle tested, really, who are slowly broadening their connections. That's inherently really attractive. And so I'm interested in that because I'm lazy and I don't understand a ton of other blockchains. So for me, absolutely, give me a button to click, number go up. But when you were kind of describing a yield optimizer as making number go up both more accessible, easier to understand, and sustainable, I think that's such an important aspect. And I did drop your post into the chat across all of the platforms. But maybe that's something you want to kind of go a little bit more in depth on. It's just because you're right. Most of the projects out there right now are moonshot tokens. They rely on initial hype, on absolutely zero substance, on numbers that just, take a hella run. And no matter what, anytime you have something that has parabolic growth, you also have parabolic pullback. And that's just an inevitability. So the idea of saying, well, yeah, we are always going to start with some bigger numbers, but our goal is to kind of settle into something that will last for decades to come, is a very different approach than now, buy, blah, you know? And then inevitably just having it all drop out from under you, or worse, go out with a whimper and not a bang. It's a different way of kind of saying we want to build this with a different kind of focus in mind. So I guess sort of from that side of things, I could see that Epic Fail is asking, what kind of chains or what kind of goals are the next step? Because PolyCUB, you're saying, yeah, we need a couple more months for this to play out, but definitely we're seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing a lot of accessibility and sustainability already kind of being the foundation of what's going on. So do you have an idea of where you want to go next? Like, you've obviously got a stable of chains that you're interested in and that you think are really good fit. Is there something you got your eye on, or?
Yeah,
confidential information.
I'm kind of always looking into these other chains, and obviously I've been interested in a lot of stuff like Thorchain and Terra, and a lot of these different blockchains that are creating a lot of opportunity. I've definitely been interested in them, and I'm continually interested in them and using them to the best of my capacity in my free time. And this kind of interesting thing though is that with PolyCUB we spent so many months. I mean, it was like 7 months of designing and developing and kind of going back to the drawing board and just rebuilding stuff and making sure that we were building the best platform we could. So with PolyCUB, there's still so much more that has to be released. So I know everyone's kind of looking on and trying to figure out what's next. But I think what you should be focused on is what's next for PolyCUB and what we're doing there, because obviously, provided that PolyCUB works out and is very successful in building this super sustainable yield optimizer, which is going to kind of unfold over the next couple of weeks and months. All of these features that we've built that haven't even been released yet are also going to be highly relevant to that more expansionary aspect of it. So where we're headed right now is releasing the protocol bonding and the protocol owned liquidity. And then shortly after bonding, we'll see the collateralized lending. So, right now the focus is getting bonding out. Right now we're just testing it, and then we're going to get it out in the hands of everybody, where you'll be able to essentially bond assets with the protocol liquidity. And then, from there, we're going to move on to this bigger mechanism that we've been spending a lot of time building, which is collateralized lending, where you can take PolyCUB, you can stake it as xPolyCUB, then you can take those xPolyCUB LP tokens, and then you can stake it in a collateralized vault and take out a loan against it from the protocol liquidity. And that does a lot of different things. It gives people an incentive to hold xPolyCUB, because now they don't actually have to sell it to get liquidity to put into another opportunity. They can just collateralize it, take the liquid funds, and then put that into the opportunity, and then still hold their xPolyCUB. And then on top of that, it creates this kind of self-paying loan infrastructure where there's a small interest rate on whatever synthetic asset is loaned out to you, and that interest rate is paid off through the earnings on your xPolyCUB. And the protocol liquidity is earning from that interest rate and then building itself even bigger. So this protocol owned liquidity is just going to continually rise over time through management fees, through these synthetic loans, through bonding. And as it grows over time, basically the PolyCUB sustainability just continues to increase. So, looking ahead is still fun. And obviously there's a lot of chains kind of on my list. Obviously Avalanche, Phantom, and Terra are kind of the top three there. But really the key is rolling out these features that we've spent all these months developing, like bonding and collateralized lending.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's cool to kind of hear you break it down like that, because for a lot of us, our our financial understanding is being like exponentially expanded by our involvement in the crypto space. And so in a lot of cases, the way that we understand things like loans or whatnot, the only experience that we've had and the only sort of understanding or contextual relevancy that we've got is traditional fi, tradfi, I don't know what you would call it, but we know that we borrow money from a bank and then the bank literally flays it out of our hide, you know, until we give it back. And so it's very interesting to hear some of the breakdowns of what could happen in a system that is meant to kind of help you maximize your earnings and then also kind of use those earnings, you know, like against the interest that you have on a loan. And for a lot of people, when you need a loan, you know, in the traditional system, you know that interest is going to be chasing you for the rest of your life. Whereas if you're working inside a system like this, you've spent time to build up your assets, you're in a system that is helping you not get so behind the eight ball, which is really interesting because loans are a scary prospect for people. And I think they're probably a really important financial tool that people don't leverage probably as effectively as they could. And this is going to be a huge space and is already a huge space in decentralized finance. So, you mentioned bonding, and I'm going to go I saw you guys put out the roadmap recently, so I'll drop that in chat. But again, you touched on it. I'm going to be the first to say, don't know what it is. Can you explain that? Because it is going to be sort of one of these core features that you're going to put out in the coming dominance of PolyCUB.
Yeah. So that roadmap is really focused on, you know, the immediate things that we're getting really ready to release that we've been developing. So, you know, I know that bonding is kind of this kind of hard concept for people to grasp. So obviously you've got bonding and collateralized lending that are next. You know, this concept of bonding and basically interacting with the protocol liquidity is kind of a newer concept where you know, we saw it kind of take off with these DAO forks like Olympus DAO and you know, Clima and some of these other projects that came out. But what we've done is kind of take what we learned from their success and failures is basically create this protocol liquidity that's not just used in kind of a vacuum. It's kind of used in more of this expansionary way where you know, basically just to give a quick rundown of how it works, you know, you bond, you look at the bonds and there's different available bonds and you just drop that link. And basically you can see there's like PolyCUB USDC, PolyCUB WETH Bitcoin, you know, and then a stablecoin bond. And essentially what you do is you look at those bonds and you see that there's essentially a discounted rate that you can buy PolyCUB at. And that discounted rate is dependent completely on market dynamics. So if there's a lot of competition for that bond, then the ROI will basically decrease. And once the ROI decreases, the competition decreases because now people will want to wait for the ROI to be more attractive. So it's kind of this self-correcting process where you know, the ROI expands and then people come in and then it contracts and then people wait for it to expand again and then it contracts again after that. So essentially, you're just trading LP assets like Ethereum, Bitcoin, with the protocol liquidity, and you're getting like an instantaneous ROI in PolyCUB terms for that deposit. So the whole point of that is to build the protocol-owned liquidity, and the protocol-owned liquidity is built through Kingdom's management fees, which is essentially a 10% income fee on all the assets that are sitting in PolyCUB Kingdoms. And then it's also built through this bonding mechanism. And then the other way that it's built is through the collateralized lending protocol. And all of these three things kind of driving into this protocol and liquidity are aimed at building as big of a protocol and liquidity as possible, because that kind of drives these other kind of heavy financial terms like risk-free value, for example, which is essentially if, let's just say there's $3 million in the protocol and liquidity and the market cap of PolyCUB is $3 million, then you could say that PolyCUB is sitting at its risk-free value basically evenly at its risk-free value, which means that it theoretically cannot go lower than that price.
Yes.
And if it does, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's almost like buying, HBD below $1 or a stable coin that is below its peg. Mm-hmm. It's intended to return to that peg and actually increase above that peg in the case of PolyCUB, because then you've got the speculative multiplier. And these are a lot of concepts that I've kind of borrowed from Thorchain and my obsession with their project and what they're doing. And kind of just directed them right into PolyCUB, because PolyCUB is essentially what we dreamt up as the ideal or the dream project for a yield optimizer. This is just the most ideal scenario for a long-term yield optimizer that we could think of. So bonding is this feature that is very soon in the Sooniverse, and it's gonna change. It's gonna change the way that people view PolyCUB in terms of sustainability. I think it's really interesting.
You're living the dream in the Sooniverse. Fantastic. So I'm keeping an eye on time. We're doing really good. Boy, oh boy, have we covered a lot of ground today. We have about 15 minutes left in our scheduled time together. And I know that there are quite a few people. I see a ton of people across all of the different platforms and such. So I'm kind of going to open it up. Lots of people have been throwing their thoughts in chat as we've been going, and we've been kind of addressing stuff. But I want to kind of remind everybody, show's about you too. So if you have questions or stuff that you want to talk about that falls under the PolyCUB, LeoFi, CubFi umbrella, have at it. Throw it in the chat. No problemo. But so one thing that I kind of want to bring back around is there is a chance, there's always a chance that people in our ecosystem who maybe were totally into Cub kind of missed some of the initial aspects of PolyCUB. So for everybody that's kind of finding this, checking it out, getting into it, they remember Cub and that initial period, kingdoms and dens, and probably have some assets tucked away in Cub. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's happening, that relationship between Cub and PolyCUB, and in this case, the airdrop that's ongoing, and sort of what do people have to do to double check? Do they already have assets? Could they be staking? And then maybe a little bit about sort of the ratios involved with XPolyCUB and PolyCUB, because I think that's something that probably people don't realize is an important part of kind of maximizing this early adopter period.
Yeah. It's, this airdrop, and people love airdrops, free money flying from the sky. Yeah, is awesome. And I know that everybody loves that. So what we've done with Cub is, the mission statement of Cub ever since it was launched, last year in March, actually. The mission statement is the base layer of the DeFi stack for the LeoFinance Web3 ecosystem. As the base layer, it means that it is the beneficiary of things like PolyCUB. So the PolyCUB token is essentially 100% airdropped to Cub holders. And what that means is that the initial supply is airdropped. There's no pre-sale or anything like that for PolyCUB. It was just airdropped to Cub holders. And we actually used, and obviously with this audience, people are very familiar with Splinterlands and the SPS token. We actually used the same contract as the SPS token airdrop. So it's essentially, instead of a 365-day airdrop, it's a 60-day airdrop, because I think things in DeFi move kind of quick. So we did a 60-day airdrop. We're currently in, I don't know what someone might know. I think today is the 3-week anniversary, I think, since PolyCUB launched. So we're 21 days into this 60-day airdrop. So there's still more than halfway to go for the PolyCUB airdrop. And essentially, to be eligible for that airdrop, all you have to do is buy the Cub token on Binance Smart Chain and stake it in one of 3 places, which is the Cub Kingdom, the Cub BUSD farm, or the Cub BNB farm. And if you own Cub and you're staked in one of those 3 places, then you're earning the PolyCUB airdrop, and it's a daily snapshot. So every single day you can log into polycub.com/airdrop, and you can claim whatever's there. And essentially you just have to log in with the same EVM address that you use on Cub Finance on PolyCUB, and then you can claim the airdrop. So I know that's kind of that's been like one of the biggest questions is like, how do you get the airdrop, how to claim the airdrop, all that stuff. And yeah, so it's been a fun ride so far, but I think we've made it as easy as we possibly could, which is just, if you've got Cub in one of the three places, then go to polycub.com and then you can see your airdrop. And in terms of, you asked about the ratio. So in terms of the ratio, we actually created a little thing on the airdrop page that shows your Cub holdings and then your pending PolyCUB airdrop over the full 60-day cycle. So if we're on day 21 out of 60, then you basically would just take that total and divide it by the remaining days, and then you can figure all of that out. And obviously with the PolyCUB price where it's at, and the Cub price where it's at, it's a pretty hefty airdrop in terms of stake for stake.
Yeah. I was seeing for a while there and taking a small advantage of it myself was that like you could buy Cub at Cub prices and it almost equated to like PolyCUB at PolyCUB prices 1-to-1, but those prices were not the same. Like there was some really cool arbitrage opportunities there. So, one of the things that I think probably people want to know is they're staking their PolyCUB. There's some sort of advanced tactics here. And I know like the Neil McSpaddens of the world are just dunking hard on this because, financial big brains. But for other people, again, baby steps into DeFi and kind of understanding, well, I know how to claim a token. I know how to stake a token. Airdrops, like the first layer is there and they're jazzed. One of the things that I think is really interesting, not just about the ongoing airdrop, but also about sort of PolyCUB itself, is the relationship between PolyCUB and xPolyCUB and this sort of increasing ratio in the staking and the ability to unstake, restake, how xPolyCUB translates to the number of PolyCUB. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what might be a good strategy with that particular system? You have a little write-up underneath that section on the website. But, for people who are listening or watching or who are literally just going to jump in and claim their first PolyCUB tokens, what's a good strategy around xPolyCUB and how to handle this period in the beginning where things, there is a lot of opportunity?
Yeah, so people like Neil McSpreadsheet are doing extremely well since the launch of PolyCUB. Basically, just having that edge and understanding this ratio system and how it works. To be completely honest, I had an idea of how xPolyCUB was going to work. Obviously, designing it and working on it. But then it's kind of one of those things. In theory, you have an idea of how something's going to work. In practice, it works a lot differently. Yes. Essentially, in practice, xPolyCUB worked way better than expected, and basically anyone sitting in that xPolyCUB vault has basically just earned. If you were the first money into the xPolyCUB vault and you put, let's just say like 1,000 PolyCUB into it, the ratio was 1-to-1, one PolyCUB per one xPolyCUB. And today that ratio is 17.45. So, essentially each of your PolyCUBs became 17 and a half times more PolyCUB. So it's pretty crazy to see how this has played out so far. And, the APY right now is 144,000%. So it's really cool to see kind of that mechanism play out how we expected, but even better than we expected. And, there's almost 3 million PolyCUBs staked in that vault now, which is, the majority of the supply that's out there. And, kind of what I was talking about before with what I said to John G. Olson is that, we designed Cub Kingdom to be the type of place where you can just store Cub in it and you know that you're earning over time. We designed xPolyCUB to be kind of a supercharged version of that, where you deposit PolyCUB into it, you sit in it, the ratio goes up forever, and you just kind of accumulate value over time. And then we kind of build in this utility dynamic with protocol owned liquidity, which is going to be, basically buying back PolyCUB and using it for long-term LP incentives. And then you've got the other aspect of collateralized lending, where you can actually just never sell the xPolyCUB that you hold and just stake it and then take out synthetic assets against it. So, you can even go with the design that we've got for collateralized lending, you can essentially just take out a short position on Bitcoin, for example, by borrowing synthetic Bitcoin, selling it into dollars, and then waiting and then buying back the Bitcoin. And it's kind of creating this whole little ecosystem within PolyCUB that's super interesting. So, if you're aiming to understand how PolyCUB works, it's actually relatively simple. It's just a vault where, PolyCUB is sitting in there, and then it's earning new PolyCUB from other vaults on the platform because it has that early harvesting penalty on other people's assets that's basically flowing into the PolyCUB vault. So you put PolyCUB into it, and then that PolyCUB is becoming more PolyCUB by earning from other people's LP positions.
Yes.
So it's essentially like owning the platform itself, which I think is a super cool concept. And the way it's played out is that the APY is just utterly insane. And that PolyCUB ratio, the amount of PolyCUB per PolyCUB is just continually increasing, and it is a number forever go up vault, which is what Neil asked for, and I think we delivered on, which is pretty cool.
It is. You guys have invented the financial version of a perpetual motion machine. So A++, well done. And Neil, of course, not on the team, not on the payroll, but probably if you want to look at how well he understands the system, definitely on a payroll. He's saying the strategy is simple. Trust Khal, ape early, ape often. Now, again, obviously in the crypto space, do your own research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, the whole point of today is we've really kind of been talking through how do you pick a good project? What does a good project look like? And disclaimer, this is a good project. So, do what you will. But so as we are coming to kind of the final minutes of the show, I promise I won't immediately rush you out the door, but we are on the essentially borrowed time here. Kitty Girl kind of drove it all home. She was like, I've got a great last question, and it's sort of a multi-tiered thing, but I think it gives you the opportunity to honestly just kind of like maybe toot your own horn a little bit. But basically what she was saying is, looking back to, when LeoFinance started and even the last time that you and I chatted, where you expected to be and expected to go, how stoked are you with what's happened? I mean, are you on track with where you expected to be a few years ago? Are you ahead of your expectations? Knowing that this has been a wild ride, and a lot of the people here, like live right now, have been with you every step of the way. How does that feel like? How good is this, man?
I think we're not on track in terms of where we expected to be. I think we've completely, changed the tracks that we were even on. It's completely different than what was expected when everything started. I think when it started, obviously it was kind of this Web3 version of Seeking Alpha. It was going to be just kind of this website where people come in and they blog. And then obviously now it's, this whole ecosystem in and of itself where you've got all these wrapped versions of Leo. You've got, Leo Bridge, you've got CUB, PolyCUB, you've got, Leopedia, LeoDex, LeoFi.io, all, and Leo Mobile, and like all these different applications. And we've really built like this big Web3 ecosystem, and it just continues to get bigger. And, a lot of things I watch are like the KPIs on monthly active users and even subscribers to the newsletter and TikTok followers that we started getting, just to kind of keep expanding the marketing and watching all this stuff grow is really fun for me. And I guess I haven't really talked about it anywhere else, but someone asked how old I am, and I'm 24, and for me, Leo started I think like 3 years ago, so I was only like 21.
Oh my God.
And for me, it's like a baby to me, and it's something that I want to see 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, and I kind of have this idea of where we're going to be in the long run, and I just want to keep chasing that. So I remember this Matthew McConaughey, I think it was like an Oscars speech or something, where he said he's always chasing the man he wants to be 10 years from now, and for me that's kind of what LeoFinance is kind of always chasing that that next decade, ambition for what we can achieve. Because LeoFinance today compared to LeoFinance 3 years ago is completely different. So I can only imagine 3 years and 30 years from now it being even more different. And I would say just continued growth is everything for me.
And look at your timing. We're down to like 20 seconds left in the show. Brilliant, my friend. I love the idea of sort of your personal growth and your goals being the driving force for what is happening with the Leo project. You are super cool. Thank you for hanging out with me today. We'll get this and everybody will be able to rewatch it. But I am coming up to the end of the show and the end of our live time on the radio. So my name is Crimson Clad and I will be back next week. To all of you on MSP Waves, goodbye. Now, with that part being done, the Discord has ended. Anybody watching on any of the previous options, any of the live streams, YouTube, Theta, Twitch, Trovo, Vim TV, we will go for like a couple seconds more, just so it's not like, hey, Khal, thanks, bye. Whew. We'll wind down a little more gently. But yeah, so I mean, I'm stoked because I think that is one of the lacking things across the crypto space. Doxed teams, long-term vision, people who are kind of tying themselves to their goals, their own wants and needs to a project and letting that be the thing that guides them towards what they build. Because if you are interested in it, probably a lot of other people are. So big ups to you. The last thing that I can recommend is, if you want to get all these people better informed, hi kids, better informed, what are the places to check out? You mentioned a newsletter. You guys have a bumpin' Discord. You got a cool Twitter. I just learned you have a TikTok. I suck at TikTok. I mean, maybe I'm only like 15 years older than you, but I may as well. Like I say, I'm Cthulhu. I slumber in the depths. I am ageless. I don't know. So what's the best place to go? Would it be the PolyCUB website? Does it have links to all those things? Where would you send someone to just get all of the info?
Yeah, I would say, Leo Discord, if you're, a Discord user, just hop into the Leo Discord. Otherwise, I would say, go to, I can drop the link. I would say, Leo Discord is great if you're familiar with it. Outside of that, I like to point people to either the Twitter or just LeoFinance.io because, with LeoFinance.io, you've got the whole community there creating content and it's cool because you've got that, like we talked about, that diversified audience. So just heading to LeoFinance.io, you'll pretty much find everything from there.
Perfect. All right. So with that, I am gonna say goodbye to you, my friend. Thank you. I look forward to another year. It's only been a year. Gee, oh my gosh. Maybe 2 tops. I look forward to doing this again in another year and having another wild stack of accomplishments to check out. Because I'm kind of with Neil. I'm on this one. Trust Khal, ape often, ape early and ape often. So we'll keep an eye on it. And so I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody. And I'm going to remind you that it's okay if you jumped in late. FOMO is for the crypto space. It is not for CyberBuzz. You can rewatch this on Vim TV, YouTube, Theta. You can watch it on Twitch for, I don't know, however many days. I don't know, whatever. You have options. And of course, there is a post that's going to be on the Hive blockchain. It will have links. You will always be able to come back and relive all of the best parts of this little chat that we had. So no big deal. If you're just getting here at the end of it, you will be fine. I will catch you guys next week. And Khal and I are saying goodbye. Thank you for hanging out with us today. Check out PolyCUB.
Thank you.